Okay, I tried doing this video before and I didn't really like the way it came out. And I'm going to do it now and hopefully it comes out a little bit more to my liking. And what I would like to do is really provoke a discussion on YouTube and a big debate on YouTube. And hopefully there's enough of a buzz about this video, even though I'm a tiny blimp on the radar of the YouTube wrestling community. But I would hopefully, this gets around and we can all talk about this because I know a lot of people have said there hasn't been enough discussion amongst YouTube wrestling shooter video makers and that, there needs to be more of that. So what I want to do is do a video comparing or asking the question of getting a wrestler from this current generation and a wrestler of the past generation that are very similar, and then asking you and everyone else out there, whoever watches this, who do you think is the better overall professional wrestler? And the two names that I am going to use for this will be Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, and Chris Benoit. Now, ever since Bryan Danielson, American Dragon, kind of burst onto the scene after he trained with Shawn Michaels and had his developmental, and around the time of his developmental deal in Memphis, when he was with the WWF at the time, the one thing I always used to hear is that this man is the next Chris Benoit. And people would always compare him to Benoit. And then when he got released from his deal and he was with Ring of Honor in 2002, and the independent scene had this big boom just after the WCW buyout in late 2001 into 2002, and it was really beginning to flourish, people began to talk more and more about Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon, and how good he was, and how much he reminded fans of a young Chris Benoit, and how he could be the next Chris Benoit. And a lot of people had this discussion. Lots of people would say that this, they would point out the similarities. It was almost very similar in the way that fans would say that Benoit was very similar to the Dynamite Kid, and people would, compare the two. And as years have gone by, I've watched a lot of Bryan Danielson, whether it was in Ring of Honor, whether it was in uh, God, my head, whether it was in Japan when he wrestled Yusuf under Liger, whether it was in Dragon Gate USA, whether it was Noah, and even over in this country when he came over in 2005 and 2006. This was when he was contemplating retiring, actually. And I've seen enough of him and I've seen enough of Chris Benoit to kind of have an idea of who I think is the better person. Now, before you write your comments or, fingers crossed some video responses, don't just limit the debate to one thing, which is matches. Because I find that if you limit it to just one thing, it's not a full debate and a full enough discussion. I think the matches and the quality of matches are a part of it. Execution, there's so many things you can look at, but don't just limit it to just that. Also look at the other things. And if I compare matches that they've had, I think they're both fantastic at, what they did. I always felt that both of them were very good at building that drama. Um, Bryan Danielson really surprised me as a vicious heel in 2006. I was really impressed with his stuff then. Benoit was always good at being very aggressive and intense. Both of them are very good at building up drama. I think both of them are very good at working with a range of styles and looks and builds. Look at the matches Bryan Danielson had with Morishima. Morishima is a tremendous worker. But look at how believable those matches were and the drama in them, given the storyline with the injured eye. And look at the matches he had with someone like Sheamus on TV. I think he got the best out of him. And other people, I've seen, Bryan Danielson go in with some very limited performers and really get the best out of them. A lot like Benoit. And when I look at the things that they do in the matches, that's where I start to see where maybe one person may be better than the other. And in my opinion, I think that overall, when I look at everything that comes into play, I think that Bryan Danielson, is just as good as Benoit, if not better, than Benoit was at that same time. And I look at things like the facial expressions that he uses, the body language, and the things that he does that are not necessarily moves, and the way he injects his personality into these matches and little storytelling elements. And I feel that he does a better job at that than Benoit. And I've always felt Benoit was very limited in that respect, not with the body language, but facials. He, only had a couple, and I always felt one of the other things that hurt him was he was not particularly charismatic. Whereas I find, while Daniel Bryan is not Dusty Rhodes or The Rock, I do find that he's very articulate and he's a very good natural speaker, and he's been able to parlay that into his professional wrestling career. And I'll tell you something, when he turned heel in 2006, it added a layer to him that hadn't been there before. And because of that, it made his matches even more interesting and even more watchable. Um, Anyone who was watching him at that time will probably tell you the same thing, maybe. And I was really impressed with his mannerisms and the way he was talking. It was very impressive. I'm not going to go out and call him the next Rock or Ric Flair, but he really carried his own. Unlike Benoit, who I always felt fell very flat on the microphone and was always pretty wooden and stiff, and was almost very limited in facial expressions and never really got any better as time went by. Whereas I find Bryan Danielson, has done very well. And in the WWE, where talking is a big part of what they do, I felt he's carried himself very, very well with the WWE promos that they have given him. And I felt that a lot of the promos they've given him have been very real, especially the early ones during the disaster that was the NXT concept. I felt that they were very believable and things that he would really say. And because of that, it added even more to the Bryan Danielson character that we were seeing on TV, and made what he was doing in the ring that much more interesting. Whereas with Benoit, I never really got that with him. I think that this is wishful thinking, but if Daniel Bryan ever won a world title in the WWE or was booked to win a world title in the WWE, which is a possibility, I think there would be more emotion and more of a reaction from the fans than there was with Benoit. I felt that when Benoit won the belt, a lot of people wanted it, but it wasn't like a, yeah, he's won. It was more like a, oh, well, Chris has won and we respect him and well done. I don't find that it was as, I think Bryan would warrant a more emotional reaction. And if you're looking at it from a writer's perspective, when you've got the two, both are tremendous in-ring performers, but as a writer, you could probably do far more with Daniel Bryan because of his facial expressions, because of his mannerisms, because of his way he articulates himself, and because of how he talks. You could write a lot more around the Daniel Bryan character and find it easier to do things for Daniel Bryan than it would be for Chris Benoit. So, anyways, that's my opinion. I would love to hear what everyone else has to say, and I think this would be a very good ongoing debate, and hopefully this spreads around, and hopefully we get get everyone talking for a change and everyone talking to each other. So, let me know what you think. Write some comments and spread this one around. Get the word going, and let's debate.